Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the brand new episode of the Servant Aftershow presented by the Hollywood Critics Association. My name is Heather Wixson, and I am joined, as always, by Rick Hong. And this week, we're going to welcome back Kiyra Lynn.
Kiyra!
So we are digging into episode 5, which is entitled Tiger. And I don't know about both of you guys. Of course, right now is when my dog decides to start barking, which is amazing timing always. But for me, this has actually been my favorite episode so far this season. And I'm curious how both of you are feeling about this one.
Well, it's interesting because she's Nell Tiger free, and then the show is called Tiger. And then we'll also get into why the tiger aspect is relevant. And I think your dog must like is your dog's name Tiger? Is that what's going on?
No, her name is Winnie, but she's our neighborhood watchdog. She just watches out the porch. So
I was thinking maybe that's why she's barking. She's like, I hear my name,
She is ferocious though, so
yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. I like the fact that they brought it out of the townhouse. And they were interacting with way more people than I think that I've ever seen in the entire series. And I'm definitely, of course, that end scuffle that she had. I have so many questions.
I do too. And I mean, I guess we could just sort of jump in at the end and then kind of fill in the blanks as we go, because I think that sequence is really interesting because we see Leanne, basically running from the barbecue people. And it was funny, the first time I watched the episode and Dorothy mentioned how the barbecue people came in from another county. I was like, oh, we're going to have some problems because we're sort of opening up this bubble that everything has sort of existed in. And sure enough, that ended up being a big problem for Leanne. But yeah, I'm really curious about how that all played out because we see Leanne running. They're coming after her. There's a scuffle, but also the homeless kids are there too, because she goes to the park. And so I'm like, do the homeless kids help her? I don't know how this is going to play out, but I'm open for theories.
What I liked about it was this is the first time they've ever gone through the backyard. Am I right? I don't think I've ever seen them go out that back. We've seen people come in through the back, but we've never seen anybody go out through the back.
I think they went to the park that way once.
Yeah.
Or what's his Sean refers to hey, right to the homeless people so he can give them the sandwiches and stuff.
Right. I do have a theory about the homeless kids. I don't know if you guys want to hear about it.
Yes, absolutely. We love the theories here.
I have a feeling that those kids, for whatever reason, are actually there to protect Leanne. I don't know if I know they're meant to kind of give you that creepy out vibe, but what kind of gave me that notion was, I knew she was going to go out that back door. I know she was going to go in the front door, and I knew she was going to go back out the back door and into, that little camp area where those homeless kids are sitting out. So, she's going to be cornered if those guys are actually going against her. Unless Leanne has some sort of superpower, which she could possibly have, to have able to defend herself against all of those people. I feel that, the homeless kids, it has yet to be revealed that they're actually there to protect her.
I like that theory.
This back part of the show is interesting because they introduced the liquid nitrogen. So I wasn't sure if the liquid nitrogen itself was going to be in play, but you see the foreshadowing of Julian coming in and tripping over the liquid nitrogen thing or whatever, and then through the front door, they trip over the cart. I think that the liquid nitrogen came in, I believe. So I thought I kind of like that as that gives Leanne a bit of a chance to escape from them or give her a little bit more space. But the one thing too is that we saw in that last episode, when Leanne's in distress, bad things happen to other people that seem to bother her. And we saw that with the girlfriend losing her finger. So it's interesting to see how big her power could be in a group of people or when she's physically being attacked. And, even the same thing too, there's a lot of, we saw this in episode 1 or 2 with the burglar that came in. Nothing happened to the burglar per se, but just that, when she's in peril, she still manages somehow to keep herself safe, which we do see, but we just don't see the whole thing put together yet.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's really interesting too, in terms of this. Like, I almost have this theory that I'm like, I swear if we end at the end of this show and it's like suddenly she's teaming up with like everybody from like M. Night's like sort of cavalcade of superheroes, like if like we get like the characters back from like Unbreakable and everything like that, they like how like Glass like brought everybody together, and then you're like somehow this is actually happening before all of that, like that would kind of blow my mind. But it wouldn't be completely out of the realm of possibility when it comes to M. Night's work. But there is something really interesting about Leanne in this episode because, you know, ultimately she could have really, in that house, that's her domain. And she probably would have had the upper hand with them because she knows the lay of the land. More than they do. Like, so she goes upstairs, she could have bought herself a little time. But instead, because ultimately she's out to protect, you know, Dorothy and their family, she just takes them right back out of the house again. And then just comes back so calmly and like cleans up dirt, cleans herself up, and just acts like nothing has happened. And like, to me, like if I was an 18-year-old girl and people just tried to brutally murder me in public, like I might be having a little bit of a moment, I think. And I just think it's so interesting how this kid, you know, she's essentially like a teenager and she is just dealing with some really big things. And I think she handles it with a lot more grace than I think I ever would, you know, at the age that I am, which I shall not say.
Well, you also have to remember that Leanne had this really abusive relationship with her mom. You know, and she talks about, and I don't know if it was in this episode or the episode before.
Episode before, yeah.
Where her mom, she basically says that her mom wouldn't let her eat dinner until she had practiced, you know, until she had gotten her dance performance perfect, you know, and she talks, and I think she was talking to Dorothy how, you know, she would be exhausted and starving but wouldn't be able to eat. So it kind of gives you an idea, you know, she's giving you the layout of the type of trauma that she's used to. She's used to sort of operating and living in these sort of like high stakes, you know, traumatic conditions. So I'm not surprised that, you know, she has this sort of calm, whereas I think all of us would be completely freaking out.
You know, it's also interesting to kind of, like, you know, the one thing that we do know about the series as well is that the house itself is a character. And, you know, it's so like the choice to say, instead of having her just run through the street, you know, maybe calling out for help to people, whatever, but the choice that she makes to run down the street, try to come in and at least lock them out and be safe in the house. But still, you see, you know, we talked about this in the last episode about her running through the house to that backyard, which I also want to say, give a shout out to Liz Jewelry, who listens and watches and had a big comment about the house and seeing different areas of it. Thank you for that and like your insight into it. But I liked in this episode too that they still, you know, as much as that most of the episode happens outside the house, you know, on the street for that carnival, they still throw it back in and say like, hey, this house is still here. It's still a character in the show, so we're gonna use it.
Yeah, and now it has termites, which then begs the question, like, you know, I know they sort of joke about the house being 175 years old, but it's like, you know, this house has like had major issues throughout this entire series, which has sort of become sort of this running theme, which I think is, again, kind of interesting as we talk about the house as a character, because if a house is 175 years old, that's a lot of history to sort of have going on there. So how is that going to unfold in some more unexpected ways? But I thought that was interesting. And I like that you brought up the mom stuff, because I thought another little moment that I thought was really telling was when Leanne was getting her face painted and she mentioned how her overalls were her mom's. And we know those are Dorothy's. And, you know, I think it's really telling that Leanne is almost sort of rewriting her story in an interesting way and sort of projecting onto Dorothy and seeing her as that maternal figure, even though she's ultimately protecting Dorothy, which I think is a really interesting sort of dichotomy.
Kiyra, you know this. things about, having clothes of yours being taken and worn and being like, hey, wait a minute. But, but that's the thing, like in the beginning of the episode too, is like what I thought was interesting is that the kind of like even like the more open evolution of Leanne too, like in the previous episode, she's kind of wearing gym gear, a little bit more revealing, a little bit tight. And then like now she's wearing like this more casual, right? Like the overalls and the shirt, and having a little bit of the freedom to kind of just go into Dorothy's closet. And Dorothy's is kind of like, oh yeah, like I was going to wear those, but like, hey, the first person gets to, show them off or whatever, like it's starting to build like their relationship, right? Like, is it kind of like the mother-daughter scenario that we kind of started seeing in episode 4?
Yeah, and yes, I do know what that's like, considering my daughter and I are. My daughter is now, my 12-year-old is now like taller than me, but what I love seeing about, especially in this season, is how softer Sean is, and you for him to actually be going to some sort of religious, church or whatnot, and to see him really embrace Leanne as family, like you really get that, whereas he was just so straight and narrow and hard and cold, not like Julian, but in a completely different way. Like he was likable, but there was obviously a wall up, and to see him really care about her and consider her family, I'm really loving this whole dynamic to it. And I'm not surprised that she's projecting that, that Dorothy is her mom, but I do find it interesting that she keeps that mannequin in her room next to her bed after, she was calling that mannequin her real mom. Was it last season? I think it was it was last season. She was beating that mannequin up. I find that I find it all interesting, and I can't wait to see how all of that dynamic plays out.
Yeah, we've had some mannequin talk this season, because I've noticed that pretty much in every episode that you see it's dressed differently. And this time, not only was the mannequin dressed differently, but she was positioned towards the window, almost like her mother was watching everything that was going on outside. Because usually the mannequin is sort of positioned more inwards. Because I went back and watched the 2 episodes ago just to see like how it was positioned in her room, and it is different. So I think there's something really interesting about that, where in some ways it's like Leanne is still kind of controlling this projection of what her mom was in a way through the mannequin, but ultimately is like building up this relationship she'd always wanted with her mother through Dorothy. But so I thought that was interesting that she was, they cut specifically to the mannequin looking outside as everything is kind of happening and everybody's bustling about. But I love, Kiyra, that you brought up the church stuff, because I thought it was interesting, because like, how does Sean leave the house every Sunday with Jericho and nobody notices? Like, that to me, like, because you go at a very specific time and you're gone for probably at least an hour. But
it's father-son bonding time, I mean, like, like we go to a basketball game, baseball game, who knows? It's Philadelphia. Maybe they're going to get cheesesteaks, and Sean's just tempting him with the cheesesteaks, I don't know.
Yeah. He was talking about a coffee group, right? Maybe it's the coffee group. Maybe the coffee group meets on Wednesdays.
but what I liked about the Sean aspect too is that, so a couple of episodes ago we see how Dorothy starts planning for Jericho's future in terms of school. So she has like the big group, try to impress everybody. Now this is Sean's aspect of thinking of the future, where we never saw them thinking of the future of Jericho, because always like, is Jericho a real thing? Is Jericho not? Now they've accepted, okay, Jericho is in our lives. He's back again in some form. He's going to grow. He's our child. So we need to start thinking about his future. So Dorothy was thinking about his schooling. Now Sean is thinking about the religious aspect of like, which is key in, in a lot of families and lives too. It's like, you've got to, in terms of not everybody is faith-based in their household, but and so in this situation, he's kind of saying like, hey, my son's here. This is the one thing that myself, it's like kind of like something that I want to explore with him or for him.
I find that interesting, because I'm going to piggyback on top of that, Rick, because in a way, as messed up as it was that Julian tried to do the DNA test, his whole reasoning about it was to be able to make the whole thing legitimate. Because right now, obviously they're all lying about who Jericho is, but if they were to be able to prove that Leanne is Jericho's actual mom, then an actual adoption could happen. And in a way, that's Julian also thinking for Jericho's future, which he hasn't done before either. So very interesting that you brought that up, Rick, because it looks like all of the characters are headed in that direction, where as before it was just survival.
I'm curious in terms of the church stuff too, really quick. Do you feel like this is Sean's way of acknowledging that they've sort of received a miracle of some sort of religious miracle? Like, it's not just like some sort of weird coincidence or something. Like, there's something genuinely miraculous about it.
With oh gosh, what was his name? Uncle, I keep wanting to say
George?
Uncle George. Remember that Sean did have some sort of religious experience with Uncle George.
That's right.
And so, and the private investigator, his name is escaping me. They both have had some sort of religious miraculous experience with the cult church group. So both of them have been opened to believing or into a higher power. So I'm not surprised that Sean is looking for more direction or something bigger in his life now that he's been touched by whatever it is. We don't know what that actually is, but knowing that he's been exposed to whatever it is that's out there.
Yeah. I will say, we talked a little bit at sort of where everything ends up with Leanne, but what I loved so much about this episode is seeing Leanne acting the way you would expect an 18-year-old girl to act at like a big function like this. Like, she's laughing, she's dancing, she's in the bounce house, she lets her guard down, which ultimately doesn't work out necessarily in her favor, but she has like this really great time with Toby. And I think for me, because we've seen all of what she's been through, especially like season 2 being like sort of locked in the attic and going through a lot of the things that she's going through, like there's just such a joy to a lot of those sequences that I absolutely found love with it. And it was just like, wow, like she gets to have some fun. And I just think like just watching her like laughing and enjoying herself, to me was just like, wow, this is really nice. Like, you kind of forget like she's this kid who couldn't like go out and enjoy herself. Because like she starts off kind of longingly looking at like the other teenagers around, and then she just is like, hey, there's Toby, let's go sort of have our own little quasi date, which is kind of a nice little bonus there, I think.
And Toby being the dog he is, it's just like, oh, I'm gonna go back to the girl that's a little bit more available since the girl that I was with was abusive to me but made herself unavailable. So let me go find the girl that is available. So like I like his thinking. He's a smart guy. Leanne's got her web. She's got a little bit of Julian. She's got a little bit of Toby. Like that satellite. Here's the young dude. Here's the old dude. But it was kind of nice. Like to see her. Because like every time we've seen her, she's always in the house, and it's just those eyes are like, it's just there's a little bit of paranoia, suspicious or whatever. So just to be out in that street and doing all those other activities and just having a good time, it's a nice change to see, and and just to see like her character growth of her as well. Just to say like, hey, she's maybe she's letting loose this season.
Yeah. Can we talk about Dorothy and the dynamic that she feels in regards to her place at work, and how she confronts the new her coworkers at the from the station that are there to
Isabel.
Isabel, yep.
Yes. I don't know. I'm wondering, and I would love to know what your opinion is, if you feel that Dorothy is just projecting, or if this is actually something that's happening to her. Because this episode, even though we did catch Isabel talking to the nosy neighbor, and the nosy neighbor was starting to gossip about the family, and Leanne put a stop to it, it made me question whether or not this is Dorothy being insecure about the whole situation, or, you know, is it really happening, or is it just a figment of her imagination? What do you guys think?
I think it's really happening, to be honest, only because she does say at this certain point where she had pitched the story about the street fair to her work, and they turned her down, and then suddenly she turns around and then there's everybody there to shoot it. So I think it is. I will say, like, even though Isabel says something to Leanne about like, oh, you know, Dorothy gave me my first shot and blah, 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 I don't trust her. I still don't trust her. I think there's something up, and especially because she Googles Leanne immediately, which then brings you to the missing persons flyer, which I'm curious if that's going to show up, because like, is somebody going to sit there and try to say that like Dorothy and Sean are keeping this young teenage girl like against her will? Like,
But
that could be kind of weird.
She also went on the broadcast last season and put an APB out on it, basically that Leanne was missing at the time. So I think Isabel just pulled up some old information, but it is questionable for sure. I agree with you. I think something's going to come of that for sure, because they make it so obvious.
And I mean, you know, and that's what we do in this world. You know, we Google people. You know, we Google people just to say like, okay, who did I just encounter? It's like, who are they? What are they? And so like, she knows that like, oh yeah, last season this girl was like, oh, she was missing, and now it's like, oh, she's here. So let me, you know, how did she just show up? Why is she not missing anymore? And you know, the thing too about Dorothy is that, you know, sometimes it's like that thing with like rebounding. You know, we're watching this currently, like right now with the Olympics, with like certain athletes, like if they've kind of faltered, then they want to get right back on the horse to rebound. And last episode, we saw like Dorothy had like that really embarrassing moment, you know, with lactating. Is that, am I saying the right word? You know, she had, so it's kind of like, okay, wait, let me just kind of bounce back and kind of just say like, hey, I can scrub all that. And not to mention too, it's like, hey, that was my idea that the thing in Man in the Street thing, that was me. So like, I should be there, not, but then I also thought it was interesting is that she's taking Jericho, and then Julian's getting all protective to be like, we've never shown the kid to the public because of what happened to him. And now she's putting him out there to really say like, there's some baby that showed up, whether it's theirs, whether it's Leanne's or someone else's, and putting in the public eye and saying, hey, which can cause a whole other, you know, crazy things to happen if the public all of a sudden starts calling around and being like, wait, did you know, we're seeing we have records, or we didn't have records of a baby, and all of a sudden like now it's like, whose baby is this? Or if the baby all of a sudden disappears again.
Yeah, I will say I think it's interesting, and sort of, again, I don't know how necessarily these things work out, but like, so we know that there was an incident where the baby dies in the car. The police come, everybody's there. There has to be some sort of formal records of this incident, right? And also, like, what happened to the baby subsequently? Like, did they bury it? Is there a grave somewhere? Like, there would be a record of that as well. And then also, like, did they do like an obituary? Like, did they bury it? I think that stuff is like, because that's always been my biggest question is like, so what happened once, you know, they had to move on? I know they brought in the fake baby to like placate Dorothy and stuff, but like, you still have to do something about it, you know, beyond what happens inside that house. So like, you know, if you can Google Leanne, like some random teenager that quickly, like, can't you Google like, you know, incident at, you know, such and such address, you know, on this date and see what happened?
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm curious to see if that's going to come tumbling down on them, and some, you know, and I'm sure because it's Servant, it'll be very horrific and gut wrenching.
Yeah, maybe like right. Maybe something like we'll see it towards like the end of this season, possibly because they keep dropping the nuggets, or maybe something to play out in season 4.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys. I haven't actually gone through and watched the rest of the season yet, because I almost feel like I'm kind of nervous about it. So I'm just kind of like, we have it and it's there, but I'm like, okay, I know we have to start watching it because we got to go do more episodes. But I'm like, at the same time, I'm just like, I feel like I'm okay right now. Like, I know bad things are coming, and I'm just kind of nervous about diving into it, but I'm excited too.
I think what. Go ahead. Kiyra.
I'm like, I personally don't go ahead because I'm afraid that since this is edited and this is live, Rick knows this. I'm like, I'm afraid that I will spoil something while we're doing this show. So I don't trust myself. I started 6 minutes of episode 6 and I was like, oh no, I can't do it. I might mess something up. So, but go ahead, Rick.
What you're saying is the first 6 minutes of episode 6 are like crazy.
Well, I think it's, for me, it's like something that, and you guys can turn it off right now if you don't want to hear this theory, because it's a theory. That's all it is. But I want to say it's something that it's kind of like what Heather brought up at the beginning. I think this is how it kind of plays out a little bit, is that we, with like the glass and the split and the unbreakable thing, it's like, I think that we see Haley Joel Osment show up, and he's the boy, because he sees the dead people, realizes that he's the dead person. And then, but he wants to be a boy in AI. So he's the boy from AI. And so like, that's what there's some version of Haley Joel Osment that shows up and he's Jericho. That's what I think.
So this is the Osmentiverse. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. And what they'll do is they'll use the technology like they did with Luke Skywalker, and they'll de-age him and everything. He'll shave that scruffy beard and they'll slim him down and everything, and they'll de-age him, and he'll look like some distorted boy version of himself. And he's like, I'm Jericho, I'm here.
Oh my God, that would be hilarious. But I also wouldn't put it past Night. I wouldn't. That would be really amazing if that was true, Rick. Oh my gosh, but you got to go to Spielberg and get the rights, though. You got to go back to Spielberg and Kubrick to get the rights for AI to say we want to use that character, but it's Haley Joel Osment, and he's kind of from Sixth Sense, so
Or what if the twist is at the end of the series, they finally get to go on their vacation. Leanne gets to see the beach, but it's the beach from Old.
Oh, that's a good one too. I like that. That's a great one.
So you never know. I mean, and again, that's what makes the show so fun for me, is that there's so many little details to dig into, but ultimately it really is a ride, and I don't know where it's going. Like, even, I'm sure once we get to the end of this season, we'll have our theories about what's coming, but I bet most of those theories are going to be proven wrong, as we start to dive into that final season. But that's what's so great about it.
I just have to say, since the two of you are putting your wish lists out there, my Hollywood crush is James McAvoy. So if we can bring anything full circle of M. Night, please have James McAvoy show up in some sense, because then it would be the perfect for us. It would be the perfect trifecta.
Like the other personality is the baby. Is baby Jericho is like the other split personality off of the McAvoy character.
Well, what if this is the McAvoy character's like origin story?
I'd be for it. I love.
And that's what happens is, like, because of Leanne reincarnating him or whatever it is she did, created all these little personalities, and then this is all just like a huge prequel to Split.
I would love it. You guys, I have to ask you, she still has that corpse in the wall.
Yes.
Correct? That corpse is still there, and that's why
hence probably like the termites too, right? Because that corpse is like rotting in there. We've seen like the bugs kind of flying off of it. So like hence Leanne has like that weird manifestation of bugs in general, but maybe that's why the termites are showing up a lot more too, because that body is decaying behind the walls.
And for all we know, that house again has been around for a long time. Are there other bodies in that house? You never know. The house has a lot of secrets, I bet.
That's true.
One of the things, Kiyra, that we've actually talked about in a few episodes when you weren't here, is Rick pointed out, like, the house itself seems to sort of have this shifting geography to it, where it almost feels like The Shining in a way, where you kind of think you get a sense of where everything is, but then like the perspectives change and we don't really know. So who knows what's really going on inside that house?
I know. And like I said, in our episode 4 recap, our viewer, listener, Liz Jewelry, has a big breakdown of kind of the house and what her theories are about and everything else that she's kind of broken down on her own, which is really, really good too. So like, if you're listening or watching and you kind of want to get another aspect of it, go look at the comments in episode 4 of our after show and just kind of read her like little theory about the house and the attic and the different areas of what we've seen over the past couple seasons.
I love it. I love that we have people like playing detective along with us. That to me is just like really awesome. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to mention about this episode. I mean,
other than like, like I said, I love that she's Nell tiger free. So they decided to put the tiger face paint on her. But I'm wondering if she wasn't Nell tiger free, who's Leanne, if, they would have, like, if there was another choice, because like I almost want to feel like the tiger's like just kind of like the go-to anyways, if you're going to get face paint that people do.
I do like that Toby did a koala,
usually do
though.
It. So koala,
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that Toby did the koala. I thought that was cute.
And llama,
also,
like a big old,
she's a tiger and she's very free in this episode, so it really works on a lower level.
I enjoyed this episode. I'll agree with you, Heather. I want to say that this was, for me, so far, my favorite episode so far. So.
And I mean, and we're at the halfway point. So like there's 10 episodes. So we're at the halfway point. So it makes sense that now that they're building, so they got to give us something good. And, and we've had viewers, listeners, like listen to, I think like episode 2 and episode 3 to kind of sit there and say, it's been kind of boring for them a little bit. Like they don't feel like enough has gone on this season. So I think this is the kind of like to say like, okay, well, if you're complaining, then this is the episode for you to kind of see, okay, now we're building towards something and everything.
Yeah.
Yes,
definitely. And I will say too, because you mentioned how Leanne sort of has, Toby's interest. And I really love the little touch of Julian eating his funnel cake, because who doesn't love funnel cake? But watching Leanne, like sort of wantingly. And Vera was supposed to come to this event and she had a quote unquote work thing. So, I feel like Julian's been downplaying his feelings towards Leanne. And I feel like that's going to kind of come to a head at some point. But I love.
But he's still staying true. He's still staying true to Julian, though. He's still suspicious.
Yeah, so, suspect everybody and trust no one.
Yeah. What was that line that was said between between Julian and why am I forgetting his name? Sean, where he says to Sean, when did you get religious? And he's like, I liked it when you weren't religious. And he says, I liked it better when you were a drunk. I was like, oh, that was perfect. That's classic right there.
Yeah. And then it's funny because like, he gives him that punch and all of a sudden they cut to a different scene.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, what? I was like, that's hilarious.
Yeah. I have a feeling we're going to see drunk Julian again before this season's over.
I mean, I'd hate for anyone. I hate for anybody to fall off the wagon, but if anybody's going to fall off the wagon, I would support Julian. It's awful to say. It's awful to say, but he is definitely more interesting when he's like off the rails.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, this definitely kind of feels like a turning point. Like I feel like we've been leading up to this, and now it's kind of like, we've hit the top of the roller coaster. And now night is just going to take us and thrill us and loop us through the air and kind of roll us through these next 5 episodes. And I am super duper stoked. Do you have any other sort of final theories? Ideas?
Other than eventually, I mean, they've got to at least be able to show us. Hopefully, it's the next episode, but like to kind of say, okay, how did Leanne get away? Yeah. It's like they got to at least show us and let us know at some point. Does she have some magic power? Did she have people come rescue her? So that's the only theory that I've got is like they've got to at least give us that much.
Or there's literally 20 dead people in the park behind the house right now.
And I'm sure nobody will notice. I'm sure it'll be fine. Nobody will notice that in a prime upscale Philadelphia neighborhood. Not at all.
Or they're all in the wall. They're all in the wall.
Right.
In the bedroom.
It's a lot of bodies to carry back to that house.
It's true.
She threw them all in the opening in the floor. She threw them all in there and burned them, and here you go.
Well, we know she has powers, but I don't know if her cleanup skills are that good. But yeah, no.
Other than doing laundry, right?
Right.
Yeah, if she can get the bloodstains out of those overalls, like she can pretty much pull off anything. I think in my book. So. But yeah, I think that kind of brings us to the end of this episode. I'm so excited to have you back, Kiyra, and we've got, we'll probably have you back at least one, maybe two more times, depending on how it all works out. I think we've got you for two more before
I
this
think
all wraps
so.
up.
And
Or maybe we'll try to get everybody back together for the finale.
I think we should do that. I think that would be fun to kind of bring it.
Kira's definitely coming back more than that, but like maybe like we should just try to rally everybody that has all their theories and everything that's been a part of the show for the season.
Yeah,
for
I'll
the end
bring my
if it works out.
whiteboard and my string, and it'll be great. We'll have a fun breakdown.
Note cards.
Yes, you have to have your note cards, and they have to be color coded too. So I'll make sure we're already there. So, but thank you guys so much for watching the Servant After Show. Rick, where can everybody find you online?
You guys can find me on all social media at Rick Hong and HollywoodFirstLook.com. And I've got an upcoming interview with two of the cast members from How I Met Your Father, which got its season 2 pickup.
Woo!
Excellent. And how about for you, Kiyra?
You can catch me at Kierlin on all social media. And since Rick already plugged where we work at HollywoodFirstLook.com, I'm interviewing the cast of The Batman tomorrow. So hopefully we'll be able to check out those interviews up online pretty soon, or on our television show where, check your local cable listings for showtimes.
Excellent. I'm definitely not jealous at all. I'm just waiting for Batman time. But I'm Heather Wixson. You can find me over at dailydead.com. I've also been doing some stuff over at Fangoria. In fact, I got to announce this week that I did the cover story interview for their next upcoming issue that will be hitting news, sent out to subscribers and hitting newsstands in late March, early November. Wow, that is a gap. Late March, early April, and it's covering Ty West's new movie X. Which
congratulations!
Yeah, so that was.
Hopefully,
really
you can show it to us.
Yeah.
Hopefully, before we go off the air, you can show it to us. So.
Yeah. Oh, I don't have the cover yet, but they did the announcement. So, but yeah, and you can find me there and over at the Horror Chick at Twitter. So. Wow, my brain is totally broken today. So I feel like that's a great place to end. But thank you guys so much for watching. And we'll be back for more mind-bending theories and fun next week. So thanks so much for tuning in. Bye.
Thank you. Episode 6.
Woo-hoo.